Part of preparedness and prepping, of course, is just making sure that we're prepared for anything that comes our way. Our goal is to never see some of the things that we talk about on these videos. However, if we prepare for them, we will be ready for them. I always call prepping like insurance. I don't want to ever use my life and health insurance. I don't want to ever use major medical insurance or auto insurance. However, I have to have a lot of those things for safety, precaution. Well, it's the same way with prepping. Well, today's video, we're going to talk about a grid down scenario or an EMP style attack here in America. What would you do? What is the first steps to do, of course, in making sure that you can take care of your family, take care of yourself, and maybe live through something that would be very hard to do. However, it's something that we need to discuss. So let's jump into seven things that we should be doing right now to prepare for an EMP. Let's jump into it today. Today's video starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so much for being here today. If you're new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That's okay, but let us know what you think about the content that we talk about. Again, as we talk prepping, our goal is to build an insurance policy based on what we have and supplies that we need and the skill sets that are needed. Our goal is to never have to utilize these things. I hope one day my kids say, "Dad, you wasted a lot of time and money on all this prepping stuff." I hope that is the discussion one day for our kids, because if we have to use a lot of our prepping other than typical rotating food, then something bad had happened. Well, this is one of those things that we plan for. Grid down scenarios or an EMP attack. Those things are more and more relevant in our day and time because we hear of all the wars going around the world. We hear about all the AI and artificial intelligence, of course, going around in our world. Everything that we do is technologically bound, so that we build conveniences based on that. If something were to happen, these are the first steps that you need to be looking for, looking to do, and if you don't have these things in place, it's time to get them in place. Let's jump into it. Number one. If an EMP attack happens or a grid down scenario happens, now this is not just saying, okay, we may have a weather event. I'm talking we're in a catastrophic state where the grid is not coming back up and nothing is working. Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to get home. You have to get to that point. If it's not home, then you need to have that location already planned way before this takes place. My wife and I talk about this all the time, especially if she goes out of town or I go out of town with work or with the kids. What is the main thing to think about? Well, if something were to happen such as EMP, the car shuts down. We're stranded somewhere. What is our main goal and initiative? To get back home to safety. Now, is our home safe? We hope to make it safe. We've done defense in our home. We've built up this stockpile here. We've done the proper protocols to make sure our home is protected way more than anywhere else. So if we are on the roads traveling, our goal is to get back home. Now that means we may be walking, we may be running, we may have an old enough car where it can still go. If you have an EMP shield on your car, great. But the process is get home. So a lot of times people say, well, I don't necessarily care to know where, my spouse or my children are at all times. Well, that's not a good policy. For instance, if my kids have to go somewhere and my wife's taking them, she's pretty much going to say, hey, this is where I'm going. Same way with me. If I'm going somewhere, I'm going to say, this is where I'm going. Because if something were to happen, I kind of know where she's at. She kind of knows where I'm at. We know where the kids are at. And our goal is one thing: get back home. And however we can, we're going to do that. Now, one thing that we have at our home is a vehicle that we would think is EMP proof. It's an old enough vehicle that's all mechanical, and I think it would be okay. However, we also have bikes and we have other forms of transportation. So if I know where they're at or I know where they were going, then I know where to travel to get to them safely to get them back home. Number one, you got to get home. Number two, you would think that you need to start stockpiling. Well, it's pretty much too late for that. You need to become a person inside your home. You need to be introverted, a hermit, and a gray man all at the same time. You need to stay in your home as much as possible if something like this were to happen, because you become vulnerable because everybody in the world has not prepared maybe like you have. So you need to then look through your prepping supplies and your stockpile, and you learn to ration, you learn to plan, you stay home and start building that rationing plan. You start deciding what we can eat, when we can eat it, what we can drink, when we can drink it. How much defense do I have, and when can I utilize it? So first, you got to get home. Secondly, you start building the plan to ration food, to control the use of the goods. Make sure you take a proper inventory or proper list of what supplies you have and what that you don't have. What you can barter, what you have access to, what do you have more things than you need, maybe that you can utilize and trade with a neighbor. This is that time where you start building that plan. Number 3 is you have to find out, do you have running water? Does it look like you'll ever get back electricity? If your water is on for right now, if you're on a meter or you have some water in the pipes, you utilize that. You start filling up bathtubs. You start filling up water jugs. You start doing as much as you can to get as much water filled up. Fill up your wash machine. Drain the lines so therefore all the water that you could possibly get is in your home. Now, as you planned that water and as you plan to get that water in home for sanitation, for cleaning, hygiene, and for even drinking if you need it, you need to then start planning on where can I get my excess water? Where can I find water now? Well, first of all, you need to make sure that you're safe around your home. There's nothing going on that the power caused to issue, that the water is flooded or caused to issue, and that your home is safe. Well, then when we start building this plan, a ration and protocol, we start filling up the water in our tubs and making sure that we're not flushing just to flush. We're not doing anything extra when it comes to utilizing water. We're starting to ration it too. Let's find ways to start collecting water. So can you put buckets out to catch rainwater? Can you go to a local stream or lake or river to be able to grab water too and put it in some kind of containers and bring it back home? Do you have stockpiled water? And again, making sure you have enough and making sure you know how to treat that. So number 3 is let's not only inventory number 2 and getting our supplies, let's find out what we can do to get water and make sure we have access to water at all times. We don't realize how valuable water is, not only to drink. Think of sanitation and hygiene. We've talked about water lately, and I want you to really think about this. If it takes you 1 to 3 gallons a day to make it, and all of a sudden you have a family of 6 or 8 or 4 or 5 or whatever your number is, let's think, okay, if I had to live 7 to 10 days without anything and any other ways to get water, can we make it? So then therefore, if you have a pool, if you have extra baths filled up, if you have extra buckets filled up, that's all extra additives. So making sure that you are looking to fill up bath waters, making sure you are looking to fill up any other water sources you can, and if you can get it close to your home or in your home, that would be for the best. Number 4, you batten down the hatches. So we've talked about self-defense and we've talked about home defense. We've talked about securing our home to the best of our abilities. You've seen on our windows we have certain kinds of screens. They're iron and metal screens. Our doors have 2 or 3 different ways of locking and also protections of different versions of doors. We have a video on a lot of that. You can go check that out in our playlist. But you need to start battening down the hatches. Any and every way that you can secure the doors and secure the windows and make sure that your point of entry is guarded and taken care of, even if it's moving furniture or putting wood across it like you're preparing for a hurricane. You have to get ready for any and everything. No matter if you are prepared or not, there's going to be people wanting to get whatever you have or wanting to see if your house has anything they can utilize. So you're going to see looters, you're going to see vulnerabilities happen, and you're going to have a volatile society. So let's board up our homes. Let's make sure our home looks just as inconspicuous as it should. We shouldn't have all our solar generators and propane generators running. We want to make our house look like no one's home, but at the same time batten it down to a point where it is safe and secure. If you've not watched my home defense video and you've not figured out ways that you can defend your home, I would challenge you to really look into that, because again, if you have all your preps, if you have all your family and everything's indoors or in that location that you're bugging into, you need to make sure that you can batten down the hatches and make sure that you can stay safe in that home. Number 5 would be, let's go through our medications. Let's figure out what we have and what we don't have. Let's see, do we need the antibiotics that we've gotten from places like Jace Medical? And I challenge you to look at those kits for safety in these kind of situations. Let's go through our first aid, go through all the needs and necessities that we may need. Because if we're outside doing things, we're trying to build our skills, we're trying to bring in water to the home, things like simple minor scrapes, cuts, springs, all that can really put you vulnerable. So we need to make sure that we have things like splints already put up, that we have over-the-counter meds, that we have antibiotics, that we have clotting agents, stitch kits or butterfly bandages, that we have tons of gauze. Think of this. Have you thought about, well, if an EMP happens, if you're close to any kind of reactor, like a nuclear reactor, or this was caused by a nuclear incident, do you have ways that you can cover yourself, such as iodine? Do you have respirators? Do you have extra oxygen? Do you have a place that you can go? So we start thinking through medicine at this point and saying, okay, if we can't leave for the simple things, what do we need? In yours, you may have alcohol peroxide, you may have liquor to make sure that you can disinfect with, you can clean with, you can clean wounds with, and also you can utilize it in several other ways. Now here's the thing you need to think about. The big part of medications or over-the-counter meds or prescriptions or antibiotics is, what do you need to sustain life? So if you've not prepared to have extras of all the things that we're needing, such as medications that are life-sustaining, then this will be the only time that you've got to figure out what to do. Do you have to go to town? Do you have a bicycle to get to town? Is there someone's home you could go to that would have that extra supplies that you can trust? I always tell people, if you're on certain kind of medicines, look at places like Jace Daily, Jace Medical. They have a supply where it's going to cost a lot of money to buy a lot of extra medication, but it's either you spend a lot of money or you have nothing that's life-saving that help you have a life if all of a sudden you have no way to get to town or go to your local pharmacist. Remember, pharmaceuticals are already in shortage, and we've become way too dependent on pharmaceuticals. Don't get me wrong. But it's some kind of medication that you take that is life-sustaining. You better have a lot of it. So this is where you make sure that you've already handled this, but this is where you're going through it and saying, okay, I may not can take my regular dosage, but if I take this amount, I know I can ration it and it can last longer. And hopefully by then, or hopefully in the next few days, weeks, months ahead, we can figure out what we need to do from this point on. But right now I need to make sure I have enough to get through at least the next coming weeks. Number 6, you're checking your transportation. Let's go through every vehicle, let's go through every kind of car, every kind of lawnmower, kind of see what works and what does not. If everything's broken, tore up, that means you have no mode of transportation. But we've talked about this in other videos. Either you better have a horse if you live in rural America, or you better have a bicycle that you can turn around and use your pedaling ability to get where you need to go. So you need to look at your transportation and ways to get where you've got to go. Now the thing about this too is you have to know where you're going. A lot of times we depend on our phones to GPS and tell us where we're going and making sure we know what direction is north, south, east, and west. Well, you need to practice location and navigating to get where you're going without having GPS. If you have a compass or a map, that's great. But if you're not used to traveling some places, you may not know where to go. So you need to make sure you have plans. You know, we talk about getting back home. Well, again, in my small town, I know just about every county road there is around us. And the little town is so small, you can kind of see across the other side. But for people that live in the cities, do you know where you're going? Do you know how to get out to a certain place? Do you know how to, if you had to leave and had to bug out, or you have a major issue going down where you can't hunker down, where you can't stay in your home, where you can't stay in this urban environment, do you even know how to get out of town without having GPS? Do you know what north, south, east, and west is? I will be honest with you. When we have to go to the big city, like if we go to New Orleans or big metropolitan areas, to be honest with you, because I'm not used to going there a lot and I'm not dependent on, living there, I have to really familiarize myself with that location and which way I'm facing at all times. Before I go anywhere, I want to make sure I have a map of that location, or at least know how to get in, get out safely, not even on public thoroughfare. Maybe not on the busiest roads, maybe some back roads. Let's make sure we have another form of transportation manually, such as a bike or horse if we had to leave. And then let's also make sure we know the directions we have to go when we can't depend on our phones or some kind of GPS. Let's learn how to use a compass or maps, or let's just learn the way we should be going without having to worry about, am I going the right way or wrong way? Going into more danger or less danger. Number 7 is we have to plan for the things that we don't want to talk about. We have to use the restroom. We have to have sanitation and making sure that we have a place to keep the sicknesses down, the viruses down, but also that we can keep some hygiene in or around our home. Now again, if you have a place like us and you live out in the country, there may be a place where you can still go outside and use the restroom. Dig you a hole, make an old outhouse, have a camping style toilet, learn to utilize the outdoors for a restroom. That's a lot easier for people like us. That's not a big deal. Now, we would have a secondary version of that inside because at night we wouldn't go out, and when things were dangerous or we were vulnerable, we sure wouldn't go out. But we would still have access to outside at some point in time. But for you that live in the city and live where you can't go outdoors and you're in apartments or you don't have any kind of outside availability, you need to find ways that you can say, you know what, I may have to use the restroom in a bucket. I may have to figure out an area that I can make a makeshift bathroom with. Now, I know that sounds crazy, and a lot of times people think you are losing your ever-loving mind. I'm really not, because if I know that if I've got to prepare for something like this, I need to make sure that I'm ready to utilize whatever I have to do and whatever means necessary, if that's pooping in a bucket. So you have to make sure that we're ready for that. So think of sanitation and think of hygiene. Nature will call and you will have to utilize the bathroom. Well, if you can't use the bathroom, and the last thing you want to do is when you don't have running water or you're trying to conserve water, we're not going to go in the bathroom and use the toilet that doesn't work or go to a sink or bathtub. That's craziness. So then we have to say, okay, we may have to set up a makeshift outhouse in home, which is crazy, but you may need it. So think of buckets, think of sawdust. I know that's crazy, nobody wants to talk about it, but it's things that you should be thinking about. If you have access to outside, you have access to a balcony, you have access in some way, then you have a little bit more availability, I guess you could say. But sewage backup is a serious issue. Sanitation and treatment plants that are not running is a major serious issue. Again, rural areas not as bad, but you say you have a major building that everybody lives in and sewage is not working, that's going to become a nasty place really quick, and you're going to see a lot of people start getting sick and falling back on medicines or getting sick and not being able to take care of them and themselves and their families. So number 7 would be, let's focus on sanitation. When nature calls, we got to know where it calls us to. Now lastly, I want to mention one thing. In any kind of situation like this, panicking would take place. Having some fear would take place. Being scared is okay. I would challenge you to for sure make sure you're honing in your skills. Make sure you're reading good books and learning how to do better in a situation in an off-grid kind of lifestyle. If you prepare that way and you know how to cook off-grid, you know how to take care of yourself out in the woods off-grid, you know how to make it around in your home in the dark, you know how to be the gray man, all those things are very good. But this is something that you're going to have to think about too, is we can physically and mentally prepare all we want, but we have to spiritually prepare too. We're going to see craziness and chaos and collapse for sure if we ever saw an EMP or a grid down scenario. I don't want to ever make light of it. It would be hard for people who typically are good preppers. It's going to still be hard. So we have to learn to build community. We have to learn to try not to panic and rely back on our faith, rely back on skills and understanding we prepared for this, and let's take it easy and let's learn. Let's do it together. Let's be safe. Let's follow our plans. Let's get home and let's wait this out. Studies show that if EMP happened in America, over 90% of people would not make it. Now, that's not saying they wouldn't make it the first day, but they're saying over time they can't prepare, and they're used to conveniences and they're not used to not having things. All that starts coming, that may be a slow process. That means there's going to be a lot of vulnerability. That means there's going to be a lot of volatile times. So you have to stay sane, gain wisdom, seek not only physical and mental preparedness, but spiritual preparedness to make sure you're ready to face whatever comes your way head on. And know that, yes, fear and panic will come. But if we learn to work through those things, especially if we have someone with us, like a family member, our children, our spouses, maybe your community that has like-minded ways, I think we can make it and we can do well. And to be honest with you, if this happens, there's a reason it happened. So it's not going to get any easier for a long time. But no matter what, if we have faith in God and know spiritually that we're prepared, it really at this point doesn't matter. It's taking care of our family, but knowing that we're going to be okay. So I hope this video helps. It's not a scare tactic. It's just saying, you know what? We need to think about this. We're talking to world powers about nuclear issues. We're kind of trying to pick fights all around the world. We have an economic issue happening around the world. Our cities are struggling. There's a lot that could really go on and could make something like this happen. We have a lot of world powers that don't really like America. So if we see grid down situation, we see an MP, We have to make sure we're ready. This is a good list, a good checklist, a good thing, a good reminder of 7 things you should be doing, and ultimately, mentally, physically preparing, but spiritually preparing. Guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless. Happy homesteading.